All right, what's going on, everyone? So we've got the February Q&A. These are questions coming in from paid subscribers on Substack as well as channel members on YouTube. So thank you all so much for your support. It's allowed us to grow the team and put out more, and I think better content. And we're going to get to that in the second half of this video. I'm pulling in Adam Rousselle, the editor-in-chief for our Substack, who's kind of the driving force behind all of the topics and the articles that are coming out there, to talk about what we're doing, kind of dive into more details of what the future holds for that product, the written product at least, and then some introductions of other team members there. Also, there's some aspects here, one about Iran, where Adam spent a lot of time studying Iran, much more than I have. So I thought one of these questions at least would be much better suited for him to take on. Again, that's the second half of the interview, or second half of the video, not an interview. But diving in here, we got the first, there's two questions right out the gate from Abe and Bozo007 that I wanted to address kind of together. So Abe said, why do you spend so much time worrying about TikTok? And Bozo said, curious, what do you think the reason is for your being constantly shut down on TikTok? So the issue there, for anybody not familiar, is my account on TikTok. That's where I started making any sort of video content at all. The account there has been permanently suspended or banned twice, which apparently that permanently doesn't really mean what you think it means, because the account was reinstated after getting kind of roundabout in touch with people there. But anyways, it's the same content here on YouTube. The videos on TikTok are just clips from these YouTube videos, and they're being flagged left and right for ridiculous things like AI generated content. Half the time they say that I've stolen the content from someone else, promoting drugs and alcohol. And then every time that there's like even a soldier shown in uniform, they flag it for graphic content. So anyways, to get at the question here, I've stopped posting there recently just because it's too much of a headache. And to be honest, talking here to the YouTube crowd, it's YouTube and Substack that have allowed us to grow the team. You know, something like 17 million views on TikTok last month, and the check they send in for the creators was like $600. So that's nice, it's something, but that's not where you can grow a business from, if that makes sense. So anyways, the reason I spend so much time worrying about it is because there's a very active conversation around these topics on TikTok. There's some huge percentage of people 18 to 25 years old that get their news from TikTok. I think it's an important place if you want to be a part of that conversation. And it's not a matter of growing the account and getting more followers or getting the revenue piece. Just talked about that, right? It's not on TikTok, at least not for me and not for my type of content. It feels like censorship. I hate to throw that word out because I think it's overused, but these are very important subjects, I think, to the United States, national security, and how we are viewed and how we view the world. So when they're being removed, I think that's a big deal. And it's bigger than me. Part of the reason I've stopped posting there recently is it just got to the point of too much, beating your head against the wall, an uphill fight. I've reached out to both of my senators here in Tennessee. Have had contact there discussing this. Nothing came of that. And then multiple other avenues. It's an uphill battle. I'd rather be in a place where the content can be viewed and interacted with and I can get feedback from you all. That's just not happening on TikTok right now. So the reason that I think that's happening is mass reporting. I don't think there's some big Chinese TikTok conspiracy. It's mass reports from everything I can tell, where some people don't like it. They start reporting the content for all sorts of different things. And the reporting admin, kind of the back end on TikTok, is broken, is not able to handle that at this point. Again, personal perspective there, but I'm pretty sure that is what is happening on TikTok. But I don't want to spend any more time on that because this isn't TikTok. This is YouTube. And again, the reason we're able to do what we're doing is because of YouTube and Substack. So then from Snidney W. Lash, 2448. Recently, Willie OAM did another interview with a gentleman called Soldier X. He served as a foreign volunteer in Ukraine. I found his story and overall comments on the war interesting. Any thoughts on that interview if you saw it? I've not seen it, but I'll go back and check. Will you be doing something to cover the foreign fighters in Ukraine now that we are 2 years into the conflict, or any interest in having Gray Dynamics back on for a follow-up to the segment you did on Russian mercenaries? Yes to both. Generally, foreign fighters is a tricky one. I've done some high-level conversations about that, but that term applies so broadly to so many different people and their experiences in the war. It's worth diving into, but that feels more like a project, if you will, than just a topic of a video. Again, if you think of the number of people that went to Ukraine in the opening days of the war and spent very little time at all and turned around and came back, like that is a story worth telling. Like, what did they think they were getting into? How did they get there? And then contrast that with people who have now been in Ukraine for over 2 years fighting. Like there's so many different stories that kind of fall under that one umbrella of foreign fighters. So I'm interested in it. I don't know that a video is the way to do it, more like a project or a documentary of sorts. But it's going to be a very interesting subject whenever this war wraps up, to look back and see the foreign volunteers that went there to fight. And on both sides, we're starting to see some of that in Russia as well. Not as much as we're seeing out of Ukraine, but it is technically on both sides of the battlefield. And in terms of interviews, Gray Dynamics is great. I'll link their channel in the description below. They put out a lot of really, really valuable free content on their website, on Twitter, on Instagram, all that. They're a great group of people. No issue having them back on for another interview. I've noticed when I'm looking at the channel and the content that's come out, the interviews don't do that well. And I don't know if it's probably my interviewing style. If I look at the guests and the people that we're having on, they're all great and like very accomplished, very knowledgeable, or I think so. Or they've made a career, right? They're not nobodies. But the overall, any one of the interviews that I do, even when they're shorter, like 15 to 20 minutes, they tend to not perform anywhere near as well as other videos. So it's not that I'm opposed to doing it, but you try to take feedback from wherever you can get it. And that is a piece of the feedback, is it looks like, just based off the analytics, that not as many people are interested in interview style shows, or at least on this channel. Maybe that's something better done on Substack or in a podcast or some other format. I like it. I'm kind of torn on it because there's a couple issues here. One, I really like being able to get these people that are experts in different areas. Gray Dynamics is a great example. Diving into the Russian mercenary question, where it's not just PMC Wagner, right? He went into all of these details of these different little organizations that aren't very well known. I love being able to have those conversations because I'm learning too. It feels like I'm cheating. I get to have the conversation with the expert for everybody's benefit, but I'm right there, able to ask the questions that come to mind. So I do really enjoy that. The other side of it, though, is my interview style is more just to let the person talk and just hear, like, let them go. Whatever they have to say, get them going. And I have at times had folks on that have said things in retrospect I can see are controversial or misleading in a sense. And I don't like the position of trying to like fact check somebody in the middle of an interview. I think that sets a different dynamic than what I'm going for, which is just a free flow of information, a free flow conversation. And it's tricky then at times. And I don't want to put out bad information. So it's a lot of things that go into the thoughts about interviews and who we have on and who we don't. So anyways, yes, it's in consideration. We'll see where it's going, but I will check out that Soldier X interview from Willie OAM. All right, and then we got a question here from Chris. It's a long one. I'll put the whole paragraph up here on the screen. I'm just going to read the first portion. He says, I know this is a deeply contentious topic, but do you ever see yourself doing a video outlining what you think the correct action Israel should take are? Big picture, no. And the reason for that is I don't know that I have the right answer, or we, the United States, have the right answer. I personally, and I've probably slipped up on this in the past, but I very much dislike critiquing actions on the battlefield because I'm not there. And it's not just a matter of I have more information now than the commander did at the time, but it's hard to understand the pressure being felt in the middle of a battle when you don't have clear information. There's just plain out things you don't know. And then the stress of recognizing that life or death hinges on your every decision. It's so drastically different to sit here in the comfort of my own home and say what could have or should have happened or how they should or should not proceed that I try to avoid that. Again, I've probably slipped up in the past, but I try to keep true to that with any conflict around the world. The other aspect here is if we look at the U.S. experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's hard for me to say that we know what the right answer is. There were times where we were successful in Iraq, we were successful in Afghanistan, but by and large, I think it's very hard to look at either one of those campaigns and say that we know exactly the right way to wage modern war like this against an insurgency, against the terrorist network. I don't think we have the solution. There were parts we got right. Certainly, there were also parts we got wrong. But when you step back big picture, it's hard to tell what that is, right? Did we drop too many bombs in Afghanistan or not enough? Did we make a mistake by not going into Pakistan to root out the Taliban headquarters elements that were there and the Al-Qaeda leadership that was hiding there, launching cross-border raids into Afghanistan? Was that a problem, or did that allow us to continue to fight the war in a successful manner? Right? Was it that we spent too much money in Afghanistan or not enough money in Afghanistan? It's so complex. War is so complex that it's hard to look at any of this and say, in retrospect, what we did right to relay to the Israelis in Gaza. One thing that I would say for Israel is I don't think your messaging is being received around the world. And when I say messaging, I don't mean propaganda or misleading or deception, anything like that. But when I talk to, and I'm sure you've seen this in media, when you see statements from the IDF, from Israeli officials and Israeli civilians, a lot of times they'll say, Hamas is awful. Did you see what they did? And if they have the opportunity, they will do it again. And a lot of times that's used as, so we will continue to fight to eradicate Hamas from Gaza. And I agree. I seen what Hamas did was awful on October 7th. And I do believe that given the opportunity, they would do it again. We're on board, same page. I don't think that message is being received around the world the way you think it is, speaking to people in Israel. That checks the box for justification for continuing on throughout Khan Yunis, further south into Rafah and all that. For Israel and for Israeli citizens, I believe it's enough. But when you look around the world, even to a degree here in the United States, one of your strongest, if not the strongest ally, it's not even landing here across the board. And when you get into other places, Africa, Latin America, Asia, it's a big miss. There are a lot of people around the world right now that are looking at how this war is playing out and saying that Israel is going over the top and they're doing far more than they need to keep themselves safe. So, I know that's not necessarily the military perspective of how to proceed, but one big takeaway that I have right now is to Israel is I don't think the messaging is landing. I think it might be landing for a domestic audience, but for an international audience, I don't know if people understand how little that's coming across to people in various parts of the world. And with that, we'll shift over to the second part of this Q&A, pulling in Adam Rousselle, the editor-in-chief of our Substack. All right, so we're pulling in Adam Rousselle for the second part of this Q&A. If you've been over on Substack and you read some of the articles we're putting out over the last few weeks here, you're familiar with Adam. If you haven't been there, go check it out. Adam's pumping out and he's the editor-in-chief for Substack, right? So he's organizing the thoughts and kind of driving the team towards the products that are there. Thought it'd be good to pull Adam in, introduce him, and then answer some of these additional questions that came in on Substack. So Adam, thanks for taking the time, man.
Thanks, Preston. Good to be here.
Any quick introduction? I know we were talking about doing like a post on Substack, but if you got a couple minutes here, talk a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So Preston and I connected not that long ago, probably 8 or 12 weeks ago. And we started talking about research for videos and stuff. I had just gotten back into kind of geopolitical research and that sort of thing where I had done it in school. I've been on this kind of thing my whole life, but I finished my master's degree and I instead opted to work in commodities. And I did research and was an editor, managing editor for a team for a commodities company here in Asia. I'm in Vietnam now, and covering mostly iron ore markets. But I got back into my passion the last few months, and it's been great, and I love doing it. I love putting out stuff, and the guys we've got lined up are doing great research, and I'm learning a lot from them as well, and of course from Preston.
So the other couple guys that we're working with at this point, Uday Bakshi and Peter Smith, we asked them to send in a quick bio, so I'll go through that. Uday says, I manage operations and info risk at a risk mitigation company. I've also worked as an analyst in the geopolitical risk space since 2017. I've written for Militant Wire, Jamestown, GNet, a couple other places. I grew up in UAE and then Indonesia, did university in Singapore, worked there for a while, now based in India. Spends a lot of time focused on issues in Southeast and South Asia. And then Peter is an investigative journalist with an NGO called the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, where he's been infiltrating and covering white nationalist and neo-Nazi organizations in person and online for the last few years. So, unique perspective there. He said his research is focused on Canada, but regularly expands to include Europe and U.S. Far-right extremism. He's done a lot of pieces for us recently talking about terrorism and the terrorist threat abroad. He's also written in Jamestown, GNet, Militant Wire, EurasiaNet, Lawfare, and more, currently focused on global conflict in Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. So we'll put links to all those guys' Twitter accounts in the description below, but those are the ones at this point kind of pumping out the content on Substack. So
Yeah. And if you guys dig in, I'll to my publications, I'm in a lot of those journals as well. Yeah.
So I think the natural place to start here, Adam, then is a question from Princeton Scotch. Said, now that you have staff and are publishing articles as well as video content, have you thought of rebranding? And I'll start here, Adam, and then throw it to you.
Yeah.
Yes, this was a conversation before we started putting out these articles for a couple reasons. The big one is the intent here is not to make it look like I'm writing these pieces, because I'm not. I'm involved with the team. We're in constant communication, but the articles written by Peter and Uday and Adam, that's their work. So we don't, when the name of the publication is Preston Stewart, I think it gives the wrong impression. So yes, we want to change that. It also makes it sound like a personal blog, and that's not at all what we're trying to go for here. So it's in the works. I'm really bad at coming up with a name, because I either think of something that's way too serious or way too niche, or not serious enough, and then I don't make any progress at all. So anyways, Adam, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. We obviously gain a lot from having Preston's prestige and his following, and we're very grateful for the audience. In terms of branding, we don't. Yeah, we're both of us are kind of drawing blanks sometimes. We think about it a lot. Usually every few days, we've got ideas bouncing back and forth, and we will have something. Fairly soon, I imagine.
We'll get there. It's in the works. And this one I'm going to throw over to you, Adam. So it's from Forest Dweller. It says a large number of Iranian youth are actively pro-U.S. and pro-Israel, despite their long life indoctrination to hate the U.S. and Israel. This is one of the results of the women life freedom revolution that is still ongoing in Iran. Why do you think this revolution hasn't gotten more attention? I just know you've spent a lot more time studying Iran than I have.
It's one of the kind of major paradoxes of the Middle East that the country that has definitely the least contact with the United States, and certainly whose government is probably the most anti-American, has the most pro-American population. I think that's twofold. I mean, number one, they haven't been bombed by the United States recently, but also there's a deep-rooted cultural aspect to that, where during the Shah's reign, there are a lot of fond memories, not necessarily of the Shah himself or his government, but of the freedoms that were around at the time, particularly for women. And I think that this is 1970 up until 1979, so it's really like their parents' generation, who are very familiar with a very different lifestyle that was very influenced by the United States. I mean, if you look at the time back then, I mean, there were ads for Hilton hotels in Tehran. There were people going on vacation there. It was they had a big party celebrating the 25th 100th anniversary of the monarchy in Persepolis, which turned out to be a big debacle. But there were representatives from the British royal family and the Belgian royal family and the president of the United States. So it was a total reversal. So I think a lot of those cultural aspects linger. And in the internet age, people just have access to a wide variety of content, and they don't really, they're not regulating it in the way, say, the Chinese are. They certainly try with restrictions, but it's not as sophisticated an apparatus as all that. The reason I think these latest protests haven't gotten attention, as you say, is partly the sort of atomization of our mass media. Like, I follow Iran a lot, and these things were showing up in my feed all the time.
Hmm.
I don't think they're going to be covered in the 24-hour news networks as much, because they just want to sell product now. They have a dwindling demographic of mostly boomers who are all now in like at their youngest, their mid 60s. So they're just pumping out pharmaceuticals and whatever gets them going, and it's usually like Trump or Biden. That's what goes on there most of the time. The other thing is that Iran has an albeit recent but a fairly regular history of mass protests. I can remember when I was an undergraduate in 2009, there were huge protests all across the country. At one point, someone had spray painted the main monument to the revolution in Tehran with the words "death to the dictator" in reference to Ali Khamenei, who's still in power. These things happen periodically, and they tend to be quelled. The Iranians do a very good job from their perspective of co-opting a small but very vocal minority of Shia radicals in the society, particularly among like the underclasses. And this is where you draw like the morality police and all of these awful things that have come about. A lot of the reason for these paradoxes where they're pro-American, but with an anti-American government too, is that they're, it's not a free country by any stretch, but it is one of the freer societies in the Middle East in a lot of senses. Women are brutalized there. I mean, these morality, that poor young woman who was killed, it's awful. But at the same time, they're given access to free education and have freedoms that you don't find in some other countries there. Like if you were to compare it to Saudi Arabia, for instance. So, when you have a large class of educated women who don't have opportunities in a society, it just breeds a powder keg of bad results. And the sanctions don't create a lot of opportunities for young people. And you've got a fairly young population. The average age is under 40. It's a powder keg for potential revolts. And there's other factors that are destabilizing as well. I won't get into all of that.
Impossible question, but to help me better understand it a little bit, if you take out the Iranian leadership and ran a genuine poll of the Iranian public, what percentage do you think is in line with kind of the aggressive anti-Israel, anti-US stance? Is it 50%? Is it less? Is it significantly less?
Well, I wouldn't.
Speculation.
I'm sure that there are like Ipsos polls out there that are recent. I can remember from years ago, in terms of like feelings toward the US, they were above 50% favorable. But this was a few years ago. Israel's another thing. Especially right now, Israel is just a toxic bomb to any Middle Eastern society. I think after this operation in Gaza, something like the Abraham Accords will be very, very difficult to implement moving forward, because their societies will just reject them just on the grounds of what's been going on. But the Palestinian cause is a very, very potent one, and it cuts across religious and ethnic lines in the
Sure.
Middle East, be it Sunni, Shia, Persian, Arab.
Think we're seeing that now. Okay, awesome. There's another one that I thought would be good to, and for future reference, when we put out these Q&As, I want to make it more and more clear in future sessions that these questions are for everybody on the team, whether it's Peter, Uday, Adam, or myself. If you're getting into something around Myanmar and the civil war there, probably going to pull Uday in to figure out exactly what's going on. You get into the Sahel, probably going to loop Peter in to get a better understanding and to learn how to pronounce some of those words that I just struggle with every single time. But this other one here, Adam, I thought would be good to go back and forth on just because we have different perspectives or we're coming from different places, maybe is a better way to put it. From iCorrent, he said, I have a short question. What are the chances on a World War III scenario with Trump winning compared with Biden? So I want to start with you. I don't want to try
Okay.
to muddy the waters at all here. So do you see one president or the other as more likely to be in office when World War III starts?
Well, um, I guess I'd preface this by saying there are three potential flashpoints where such a scenario could occur, and there are steps before it elevates to a World War III scenario. The first is Ukraine. If there was a major Russian offensive and NATO got trigger happy, that's an obvious one. The Middle East, if you the Russians have already talked about providing air support to Hezbollah and the Iranians. That's another one where if the Chinese were materially supporting the Iranians in an all-out war scenario, potentially that could escalate, especially if energy markets are threatened. So really watch the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, the Gulf of Aden right now is already problematic, but if the Straits of Hormuz shut down, that's East Asia's energy market primarily right there, and hard to imagine them just kind of taking that. Um, the other is the South China Sea. China's become increasingly aggressive. The U.S. has a alliance with the Philippines, and they're building new bases there. If the Chinese get more and more aggressive in their maneuvers, that could be a really ugly flashpoint scenario. And then there's the Taiwan factor. I think it would be monumentally stupid for the Chinese to try to do that. I mean, there's a reason the Americans didn't go after the Japanese there in World War II. If you look it up, it's practically a natural fortress, and that hasn't changed even with 21st century technologies. But there's also questions of China's actual ability in the battlefield that I don't think are addressed very often. But aside from all this, whether it's Biden or Trump, I don't see a lot of difference. I think that, you know, maybe who they appoint to the Joint Chiefs would be of some significance. There's been questions of Lloyd Austin's leadership as of late.
Mm-hmm.
As well. But at the same time, I mean, it's act analysis, but for whatever his faults are, Trump does seem more with it than Biden. I think about like a World War III scenario between Khrushchev and Kennedy, and these were two guys in different stages of middle age, but middle aged, nonetheless, like, early 60s, mid 40s, and they were at the top of their game, and they were sharp individuals to begin with. I don't see that with the current great power leadership right now. And I'm not just criticizing Biden. I think this is an issue for Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin as well. These are not the people, and they don't represent the institutions they once did, and that's very, very dangerous. The institutions will still be problematic, but with Trump, I mean, I don't know. Possibly his bluster and his bravado and his negotiating skills might come in handy, but let's keep in mind that he wasn't put to the test in the same way Biden has been on foreign policy. He certainly was aggressive with the Chinese, and he certainly got a fair amount accomplished in trade deal negotiations. But whether you're anti-Biden or pro-Biden, I try to take a neutral stance on all of them. Biden has inherited a very, very bad foreign policy environment that no president would be able to navigate easily. I think he's done it quite poorly, but to his credit, there are no easy answers under those scenarios.
All right, I was hoping for Adam to like drive the dagger home and take a hard stance because I'm not going to. It's not. I generally try to stay as apolitical as possible because I think that's important in a lot of the stuff we're discussing here. But also in this case, I actually don't think it matters. My view of this question, like honest view of this question, is that when you're talking about a global war, a world war situation, that doesn't happen overnight. And it's not based off of the decisions of one man that is or is not in power, right? It's things that happen over years, over decades, as these global powers move closer together, and the friction points increase. So any World War III that were to start in the next 5 years is already in motion right now. And it's in motion due to policies from both Democrats and Republicans, right? And as Adam mentioned, a lot of the bureaucracy stays in place. So we might change out the head of government and some key officials, but the majority of the DOD is the same as it was, right? The majority of the State Department, or at least the policies, very few of these things make like drastic changes. So in turn, you end up kind of looking at what is the black swan event or the one-off event that triggers the start of a new conflict. And that's, fortunately, we haven't had anything substantial to get to that point, I guess, since World War II, because we haven't had a global conflict like that. But that is just as likely, in my opinion, to happen under presidents from any administration. I don't know that anybody, Putin, Xi, anyone is sitting around waiting for one president or another. And when that happens, given that we don't know what the event would be, it's very hard to say Biden or Trump would be better at walking back from the brink or taking the action to prevent that from happening. So it's kind of a pessimistic view, but from my perspective, if World War III is coming, if it's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 20 years, it's not a matter of one president or another. I don't know.
Yeah, I would generally concur with that.
Well, we'll wrap up here, Adam, but any teasers for work you got coming out here in the next couple weeks?
Well, the guys are just I've got a new article that's about to hit on Friday about the situation in Ecuador. We're experimenting with audio articles. Some of you may have noticed the narrated version of one of my articles, narrated by me. And we're going to be doing more of those. We've got some interesting stuff. I'll leave it to you, Preston, how much you want to reveal going on with what we're going to do with the articles moving forward. But my biggest thing now is to map out the kind of pressure points and what's going on in this war, and to explore more big ideas. So the ideas that we can learn from the current context of what's going on in the world, as opposed to just rehashing what the media tells us. So, if there's a situation in Myanmar, for God's sake, check out that article by Uday. It's amazing. What are the implications? What does it mean for us living in the 21st century, looking at warfare and its consequences around the world? These are the kinds of things we want to delve into and really offer some perspective that I don't think is really out there right now. In terms of when we look at the media, at least the sources that we're using.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. They're here so much for your support. Again, all these questions are coming from the paid subscribers on Substack and channel members on YouTube. It's because of your support that we're able to do this, to have Adam on the team along with Uday and Peter, and continue to put out this content and hopefully continue to grow the team. So thank you all so much, and we'll be back with another Q&A here next month.
Thanks, guys.